He laughed at a poor man with nothing, but what happened next will leave you speechless. How one woman's faith and a single act of courage turned failure into a billionaire empire and taught the world a lesson they will never forget. Stay until the end to witness the shocking twist that changes everything. Before we dive into this incredible story, do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. He mocked the poor man until the truth silenced him. I still remember the night he laughed at me. The sound was sharp, cold, like glass breaking across marble floors. I stood in a borrowed suit, shoes too tight, hands trembling from hunger I had trained myself to ignore. He called me a dreamer, a poor man playing with rich fantasies. The room smelled of expensive perfume and arrogance. Crystal lights shimmered above polished faces. I felt smaller than the dust on their shoes. I walked home in the rain that night. Each drop stung like truth. I had nothing but a worn notebook, filled with ideas no one believed in, except her. Aisha waited in our tiny apartment. Walls peeling, window rattling against the wind. She placed warm tea in my shaking hands. Her fingers were soft, but her voice was steel. They laughed because they see who you are today. I see who you are becoming. I wanted to quit. Debt was rising. Investors had betrayed me. One partner stole my prototype and sold it as his own. The humiliation burned deeper than poverty. I told her I was tired. Tired of fighting men born into privilege. Tired of losing. She pressed her forehead against mine. Her whisper carried more power than any fortune. If you stop now, they are right. If you continue, they will remember this night differently. So I worked. Days blurred into sleepless nights. My fingers cracked from cold warehouses. My stomach ached from skipped meals. She sold her jewelry to fund my last attempt. I saw the empty box where her mother's bracelet once lay. That sacrifice felt heavier than gold. Months later, the same man who mocked me requested a meeting. My company had grown beyond imagination. Factories hummed. Screens lit up with numbers I once feared to speak aloud. I entered his office again. This time, I did not tremble. He smiled nervously. He did not recognize the poor man anymore, until I placed a photograph on his desk. A picture of a young woman, standing beside the factory gates. Her name engraved as co-founder. His face changed, because the poor man he mocked was now a billionaire, and the woman he once dismissed owned the majority of his company. He opened his mouth to speak, and I leaned forward. His lips trembled. For the first time, he had no laughter. I leaned forward slowly, feeling the smooth oak beneath my palms, remembering the splinters of the old wooden table, where Aisha and I once planned our impossible future. You called me small, I said softly, but small seeds break concrete. His eyes fell to the photograph again, to her steady smile, to the name engraved in silver. Aisha Khan, co-founder, majority shareholder. He swallowed hard. The room felt smaller now, though nothing had changed but truth. I did not know, he whispered. Of course he did not. He never looked long enough at those beneath him. I remembered the nights Aisha stayed awake, reviewing contracts while I slept on the couch. The mornings she walked to work, so I could afford one more shipment. The silent tears she wiped away. When banks rejected us again. She never asked for recognition. She asked for resilience. When our first major deal collapsed, I broke a chair in anger. She picked up the pieces and said, "If it breaks, we build better." Her faith became my backbone. Her sacrifices became my fuel. I turned back to him. "You once said I did not belong in rooms like this." My voice was calm now. Not bitter. Not proud. Just steady. I built my own room. Outside his window, our company logo shone across the skyline. Steel and glass rising where doubt once stood. He cleared his throat. He asked what I wanted. Revenge would have been easy. Humiliation tempting. But Aisha taught me something greater than victory. "We are acquiring your company," I said. "You will keep your position, but you will create a scholarship fund for young entrepreneurs with nothing but ideas." His shoulders dropped, not from defeat, but from understanding. The same lesson that once silenced him now demanded his growth. As I stood to leave, my phone vibrated. A message from Aisha. "Proud of you. Come home." Home. Not the penthouse. Not the wealth. Home was her laughter in the kitchen. The scent of cardamom in evening tea. The quiet strength in her eyes. I stepped into the hallway. Sunlight pouring through tall windows, warming my face like a promise. Yet as I walked toward the elevator, another call flashed on my screen. An unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end spoke urgently, and everything inside me went still. "Is this Mr. Karen?" The voice was tight, professional, too careful. "Yes. There has been an accident." The hallway seemed to tilt. My heartbeat roared in my ears, drowning the world. "Your wife was brought in conscious, but you need to come now." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. For a moment, all the wealth, all the glass towers, all the applause meant nothing. I ran. The city blurred past the car windows. Horns. Red lights. Nothing mattered but her name, Aisha. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. White walls. Harsh lights. Footsteps echoing like unanswered prayers. I found her room. She lay still. A thin line of stitches along her forehead. Her hand wrapped in bandages. But her eyes were open. Searching. When she saw me, she smiled. "Even now." "I told you," she whispered. "Rooms can be built anywhere." Tears burned my vision. "I would trade every building for you." She squeezed my fingers weakly. "You built more than buildings." The doctor explained it was not life-threatening. A fractured wrist. Minor concussion. Relief washed over me so fiercely. My knees nearly gave way. I sat beside her bed, held her hand, felt the warmth of the only wealth that mattered. She looked at me carefully, as if measuring something deeper. "Did you choose revenge?" she asked. I shook my head. "I chose opportunity." A soft pride filled her gaze. "Then we are still rich," she said. Hours later, as machines hummed gently beside her, I stepped into the corridor to breathe. My phone vibrated again. A message from our legal team. Urgent. The acquisition had triggered something unexpected. A clause buried in old contracts. A liability large enough to threaten everything. The numbers on the screen felt heavier than any insult I had endured. For the first time in years, fear returned. Not for myself. For the dream we built together. I looked through the glass at Aisha resting peacefully. And I knew the next decision would define more than our fortune. It would define the man I had become. I stepped into the stairwell. Cold concrete walls. The faint smell of dust and metal. The message replayed in my mind. A hidden environmental violation. Fines large enough to shake markets. Shareholders would panic. The board would demand distance. The easy path was clear. Blame the previous owner. Exploit the fine print. Protect the empire. I closed my eyes. I saw Aisha walking to work in worn shoes. Selling her jewelry without a word of complaint. Choosing dignity over shortcuts. We built this company on trust. If I saved it through deception, it would rot from the inside. My hands stopped shaking. I called the board. We accept full responsibility, EI said. We will pay. We will repair the damage publicly. No excuses. Silence followed. Heavy. Calculating. You will lose billions, one director warned. I have lost more before, EI replied. And gained something greater. News spread within hours. Headlines questioned my sanity. Investors threatened to withdraw. Stocks dipped like a falling breath. I returned to Aisha's room. She studied my face carefully. She always knew before I spoke. You chose truth, she said softly. Yes. Her injured hand rested against my chest. Then whatever falls away was never truly ours. Days passed. Payments were made. Factories were inspected. Communities affected by the violation were compensated. Something unexpected happened. Employees began sharing stories online. How the company paid fair wages. How we invested in schools. How we admitted fault without hiding. Customers responded. Partners returned. The dip in stock steadied. Then rose. Not from fear. From respect. One evening, weeks later, I stood at the hospital window again. This time waiting for Aisha's final checkup. The sunset painted the city gold. Not the sharp gold of arrogance, but the warm gold of earned light. My phone rang. The same man who once mocked me. His voice was different now. Humble. There is something you need to know, he said. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Because sometimes success attracts storms. And I sensed this one was already forming, and this time it was not about money. It is about Aisha, he said carefully. My breath stopped. She met with me months ago, before the acquisition. The world narrowed to a single sound. My pulse. She asked me to invest quietly in a foundation. In your name. I leaned against the window. Glass cool against my forehead. What foundation? For entrepreneurs who have been betrayed. For dreamers who were mocked. His voice softened. She said you would never build it for yourself. You are too proud. My chest tightened with something deeper than fear. Guilt. All this time. While I fought battles in boardrooms. She was planting forests in silence. She used her shares as collateral, he continued. If the company had fallen, she would have lost everything. The sunset outside blurred. She risked her security, her ownership, her safety, for strangers, for men like the one I used to be. I ended the call slowly. When I walked back into her room, she was sitting up, sunlight brushing her face like a crown she never asked for. "You heard," she said gently. I nodded. "Why did you not tell me?" She smiled, that steady, fearless smile. "Because generosity is quiet. And because I trust you to finish what I start." Emotion rose in my throat, thick and unsteady. "You risked everything." "No," she replied. "I invested in who you are." In that moment, I understood something I had missed for years. I thought I built an empire. She built a legacy. Not in steel, not in numbers, but in character. I took her hand carefully, mindful of the bandage. "Then we build it together," I said. She searched my eyes, as if making sure the lesson had finally settled. Outside, the city hummed. Alive. Imperfect. Waiting. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown young founder. "Sir, I heard what you did. I was about to give up today." I stared at the words, and I realized the next chapter was not about surviving storms, but about becoming shelter, and I had never learned how to be shelter. I knew how to fight, how to endure hunger, how to survive humiliation. But shelter required softness, patience, listening. I replied to the young founder, "Do not give up. Come see me tomorrow." The next morning, he stood in our lobby, nervous, suit too large for his thin frame, eyes filled with the same fragile fire I once carried. He reminded me of the night I was mocked, of rain on cheap fabric, of borrowed courage. I invited him into my office. The skyline stretched behind me, but I chose to sit across from him, not above. He spoke of betrayal, a partner who stole his code, investors who laughed, family who urged him to accept defeat. His voice cracked. I felt the old ache inside my ribs. Aisha entered quietly, her wrist healed, her presence steady as sunrise. She placed tea before him, just as she once did for me. "Tell us your idea," as she said warmly. He hesitated, then spoke. And as he spoke, the room filled with possibility. Not polished, not perfect, but alive. When he finished, silence rested between us. He looked down, ashamed, as if expecting rejection. I remembered that feeling too well. I slid a folder across the table. Inside was an agreement. Funding, mentorship, protection from predatory contracts. His hands trembled as he read. "Why?" he asked softly. I looked at Aisha. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "Because someone once believed in me, when belief made no sense," I answered. Tears filled his eyes. Not from weakness, from relief. After he left, I stood by the window again. The city no longer looked like territory to conquer. It looked like ground to cultivate. Aisha joined me, You are changing, she said. No, I replied quietly. I am finally becoming. But as the days unfolded, applications poured in. Stories of loss, stories of injustice, stories of brilliance buried under doubt. Our foundation grew faster than expected. And with growth came scrutiny. A letter arrived one evening, anonymous, accusing us of favoritism, of hidden motives. Old whispers of envy returned. I held the paper in my hands, feeling a familiar pressure build inside my chest. Not fear of poverty, fear of failing the trust we had invited. Aisha read it calmly. Then she looked at me with that same steady fire. Now you learn what true leadership costs, as she said. And I understood that building shelter meant standing in the storm, without closing the doors. The accusations spread quickly. Social media twisted generosity into strategy. News panels questioned our motives. Some investors advised distance from the foundation. Protect the brand. Preserve the stock. I felt the old weight return. That tightness in my chest. The whisper that survival requires retreat. But I looked at the photographs on my desk. Young founders holding their first prototypes. Families standing outside repaired homes. Communities rebuilding with quiet dignity. This was no longer charity. It was responsibility. Aisha stood beside me as reporters gathered outside our headquarters. You can step back, I told her. They will target you. She met my eyes steadily. I stood beside you when you had nothing. I will stand beside you when you are questioned. Her courage steadied my breath. We called a press conference. Bright lights. Cameras clicking like distant thunder. The same kind of room where I was once mocked. This time, I did not feel small. I stepped to the podium. Our foundation will open its books, I said clearly. Every transaction. Every decision. Transparency is not a threat. It is proof. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I continued. We were mocked once for dreaming too big. Today we are criticized for giving too openly. We will answer both with integrity. Aisha spoke next. Her voice calm, unwavering. True wealth is measured by the lives it lifts. Silence followed. Not hostile. Thoughtful. Days passed. Audits confirmed our honesty. Support returned stronger than before. Yet one evening, as we reviewed expansion plans, an email appeared on my screen. Subject line: urgent legal action. A former partner from my early failures was claiming ownership of my original idea. Old betrayal had returned. Louder. More dangerous. The past was knocking again. I closed the laptop slowly. Aisha watched my face. Is it him? She asked. I nodded. The man who once stole from me now threatened to erase everything. And this time, the battle would not be private. It would be public, ruthless, and deeply personal. The lawsuit spread before dawn. Headlines questioned my origin story. Commentators dissected my early failures as if they were crimes. He claimed the prototype was his, that I had built an empire on borrowed genius. Old emails were dragged into light. Fragments of truth twisted into accusation. For a moment, I felt that same rain-soaked shame from years ago. The borrowed suit. The laughter. Had I documented everything? Had hunger made me careless? My legal team urged aggression. Counterattack. Destroy his credibility. But anger clouds judgment. And I had learned what that costs. I went home early. Aisha sat at the dining table. Papers spread neatly before her. You kept everything, I said quietly. She nodded. Every sketch. Every draft. Every time-stamped note from those early nights. While I was busy surviving, she was preserving truth. You knew this day might come, I whispered. I knew success invites memory, she replied. We worked side by side until midnight. Reading, organizing, revisiting the pain we thought was buried. Some documents carried stains from spilled tea. Some pages wrinkled from nights of exhaustion, proof not just of ownership, but of sacrifice. The court hearing was scheduled quickly. As I entered the courtroom, I saw him, older, sharper, still carrying that same thin smile. He believed noise would overpower truth. Our evidence spoke quietly, methodically, undeniably. Dates aligned. Signatures matched. Witnesses testified, and then Aisha took the stand. She described the night he left our warehouse, with copied files. She described confronting him. She described my refusal to pursue revenge back then, because I had no resources left to fight. Her voice did not tremble. The courtroom fell silent. When judgment was delivered, the claim was dismissed. Not only dismissed, sanctioned for bad faith. He did not look at me as he left. Outside, cameras waited again. This time, I felt no need to speak loudly. Truth had spoken for us. As we stepped into the sunlight, Aisha slipped her hand into mine. We have survived poverty, ridicule, and betrayal, as she said softly. Yes, I replied. But survival was only the beginning. Because as our car pulled away, my phone vibrated with a new message. An invitation from a global summit. They wanted me to speak. Not about wealth, about resilience. And I realized the next battle would not test my ownership. It would test my wisdom. I read the message slowly, fingers tracing the edges of the screen like it was fragile glass. They wanted my story. The rise from nothing. The betrayal. The woman who made me whole. I looked at Aisha. Her eyes were steady, reflecting sunset light like molten gold. She smiled faintly, the way she always did before a storm. Calm and unshakable. I am not ready, I said honestly. You will never be, she replied. But that is why it matters. The summit was in 2 weeks. I would speak before powerful leaders, investors, dreamers. People who could make or break a future I had fought for. I spent days preparing. Not just my words, but my heart. Every failure, every sacrifice, every lesson etched into sentences like a map. At night, I could not sleep. The echoes of my past failures returned. The faces of those who mocked me. The stolen ideas. The betrayals that once seemed insurmountable, but Aisha stayed awake with me. Reviewing speech drafts. Correcting my tone. Reminding me that authenticity carries more weight than polish. You inspire because you suffer, as she said softly one night. And suffering is not shameful, it is proof of courage. The day of the summit arrived. A vast hall. Hundreds of eyes fixed on the stage. Cameras recording every breath. I stepped forward. The old fear tried to clutch at my chest. The urge to shrink. Then I remembered the young founder I saved. The employees we had lifted. The communities we had rebuilt. I felt Aisha's hand at my back. Solid. Steady. I began to speak. Not with the arrogance of a billionaire, but with the honesty of a man who had clawed his way through darkness. I spoke of hunger, of betrayal, of nights spent in silence with nothing but hope. I spoke of the woman who risked everything so I could rise. The audience was silent, moved, shocked by the rawness of reality in a world often sugar-coated. But just as the applause started to build, a whispered message appeared on my phone. It was a text from an unknown number. They know what you hid from them. Your past is coming for you. I froze. A cold weight settled in my stomach. The summit hall felt impossibly large. And I realized, sometimes the hardest battles come not from outside, but from shadows you thought were buried. The whisper on my phone made the room spin. But I did not panic. Not anymore. I stepped back from the podium, took a deep breath, and looked at the audience. Their eyes held expectation, curiosity, hope. I realized the truth I feared being exposed was not shameful, it was mine. Every failure, every betrayal, every sleepless night, every tear. They had built me, not broken me. I spoke calmly. Every life will face moments where the world doubts you, where people mock your dreams, steal your ideas, or leave you in despair. I have been there. I know that pain. I paused, letting it sink in. But I also learned that wealth is not measured in money. It is measured in courage, in integrity, in the people who lift you when you cannot rise yourself. I glanced at Aisha. Her hand rested on mine under the podium. Her smile spoke louder than any applause. She had taught me that love is not comfort, it is power. It is the quiet, steady force that transforms struggle into triumph. The world may challenge you. It may betray you. It may try to silence your truth. But never let fear dictate your actions. Stand with honesty. Serve others. And remember, the greatest victories come not from wealth taken, but from trust earned and lives touched. The hall erupted. Applause washed over me like sunlight breaking a storm. Outside, the city shimmered, not as a monument to ambition, but as a reflection of resilience. Aisha squeezed my hand gently. We did not just survive, as she said. We became better than we imagined. I nodded, understanding the final truth. Success is fleeting. Power is tempting. But character, the courage to be kind, honest, and steadfast, endures forever. And as we walked into the sunset together, I knew our story was more than mine. It was a reminder to the world. Even when mocked, betrayed, or broken, truth, love, and perseverance will always silence doubt. Because the poorest man with courage can outshine the richest without heart. And the greatest fortune in life is the one you build with integrity and those who believe in you. Thank you for listening to this heartfelt story. If it moved you, share it, comment below, and remind someone you are never alone.